wonderful fundraisers, and one of them has been a very important figure in my professional life, John Dinkins and Dan Bolson. Welcome so much. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Louis.
Thanks, Louis.
It's great to be here.
So we are talking a lot in the Almabase world about recognition. And one of my team members asked me, who do you think would have some good thoughts to share about this? And I immediately thought about both of you. John, I know for a fact, being on the receiving end of it, that you have a whole philosophy and a dedication to developing careers, including recognition. And Dan, I know you're involved you've been in the John sphere, but also you're involved in your own professional development programs there at Purdue. So before we even get started diving into this, which I'm sure lots of people will be curious about and will want to know what the role of recognition is in all the activities you're doing, could you please introduce yourselves? I fear I won't do justice to your careers and experience if I do it myself. So John, if you'd like to go first.
Sure. So, hi, everyone. Happy Monday to you. My name is John Dinkins. I'm an Associate Vice President for Development with Purdue for Life. We're the fundraising arm for Purdue University. In my role, I support 10 different deans and 11 different colleges across campus. Throughout my career, I've worked in the for-profit, nonprofit world, and I'm very honored to be here today. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. And Dan, would you like to share a little bit of your background?
Sure. Thanks, Louis, and thanks again for the invitation to be here. Thanks, everybody, for attending that's listening. Dan Bolson. I serve in two different hats here in the foundation. One as an executive director, and secondly as chief development officer. So I oversee one unit on campus. I also have a centralized team that works across all of Purdue. That's kind of a program where we work with high affinity, high capacity, unmanaged donors, as well as employee pipeline training. So two different hats, a lot of fun, great groups to work with. And I work very closely with John the past now 7+ years as we're in year 8 together. So he still has to put up with me.
Good thing.
Well, not only the real world, but now virtually here on LinkedIn Live too. For everybody who's tuning in, please feel free to chat in your questions. We are very fortunate to have what I consider to be two world-class experts in this part of our field that sometimes we don't pay a lot of attention to. So John and Dan, we only have half an hour, but both of you kindly offered to answer questions, to connect with people after that, and we'll be sharing contact information, your LinkedIn profile, whatever it is that you feel comfortable sharing. But John, my first question is for you. And I'd like to ask you, what do you see as being the role of recognition in career development, right? Recognition is a huge concept. And I know you think very purposefully about how to develop young fundraisers through recognition and other tools.
Yeah, thanks, Louis. Recognition to me means a lot of different things. People like getting recognized publicly. They like to be recognized individually. What I want to focus on today is rethinking recognition. When you look at University of California, Berkeley did a survey, or actually a research. They understood that those who felt like they were valued had a 43% production rate versus those who were just simply recognized. And that came in around 23%. So getting people to feel valued in their work and in the organization is the utopia of what we try to pursue in Purdue for Life. To me, what that translates back into, if you all remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization is the very tip part of that pyramid. And when you get self-actualized, you know that you're making an impact. You know that you're doing good work. What we try to do is it looks at one's overall effectiveness, what they can do. And the way that translates for us is still in a quote from a friend of mine who's a wrestling coach. We get on the mat with somebody. We require and we utilize time. So we feel strongly that there's really 3 layers of the work that we do to help a person reach that self-actualization. And in our work, it's really 3 areas. It's getting information. We know if you get information from donors, whether it be written or in communication, if you get information, then it allows you to pivot as you need in order to serve that person's needs as well as the organization. The second or the middle layer of this pyramid is knowing your resources. If you know your resources, you know what's around you, then you can pivot and you can bring in the people that you need to overcompensate on areas that you may not know, or to accentuate areas that you can grow in. Then the last piece is know your tools. Know what's in your tools. Know your toolkit. If you know the different resources and you know the different tools and you got the information, there's not much you can't do. And what it comes down to from the self-actualization is it allows you to make an impact. It allows you to make a difference, and it builds a successful and just a successful career. So by mentoring, by getting on the mat, by learning and teaching the basics of getting information, knowing your resources, and knowing what's in your toolkit, it rewards a person beyond what can happen if you get money or even a promotion. Those are important, but we're talking about sustainability.
That's so interesting, John. So you're kind of saying, or I'm understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, that recognition can actually be lots of things that sometimes we don't even think of as recognition, right?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I recognize that, you have lots of needs, including the need for information, resources, all of that.
And it doesn't mean, Lewis, that you can't provide a meaningful way to recognize someone. I mean, and provide the opportunity for the team to recognize others. That's important. I don't want to minimize that. But from our standpoint, we're looking at sustainability and how a person could be impactful and reach that level of self-actualization.
That's fantastic. And I think it leads very nicely into the next question that I had for Dan, which is the why question. So, like, why do we recognize people? What do you see as a manager yourself and a builder of young professionals? What do you see as the benefits of recognition?
Absolutely. Well, I 100% endorse, obviously, the Dinkins School of Fundraising that I started my early parts of my career in, as you did, Lewis. So, with that said, with the teams that we have now, a lot of times recognition is so focused on title and money. And that's immediately asking one quick win, go get a raise. One quick win, I want the next title. It's not built on, are you prepared for that next step in the role that you're in? Are you prepared with the toolkit that you need to be successful? So I think recognition as that toolkit, and I'll keep picking on the toolkit because that's so important in frontline work, but building confidence is what also helps employee retention. It also helps their success rate. It also helps their ability to build their toolkit. It's tough work when you're digging through qualifications at the very front end of your career. Anyone on here, and I'm sure everyone on here who's been in frontline work can think back to some really painful cold calling, right? Picking up the phone, challenging people to pick up the phone, doing things that make these small steps that lead to these bigger wins. Those are things that aren't easy to do. And so we have to celebrate the granular, simple successes that are not unimportant. It's very critical to mention that these are very important steps in their career, but they don't show up on a metrics chart. They don't show up on maybe the list of the top 10 needs of the organization, but eventually they will, because if they're doing the small things right and they're creating sustainable habits, then we can do one of our favorite terms, which is sustainable success. We can create something that you can reduplicate no matter what setting you're in, what unit you're in, what culture you're a part of. You can recreate opportunities to take that next step and be successful at it because you go into it confident. You may not know anything about the unit you represent. You may not know anything about the academic leader you're working with, and there may be challenges that'll influence your work. Most likely there will be. But if you have that toolkit that you're confident in, you're going to go in and apply your daily work and your daily efforts surrounding that toolkit, and you're going to be able to still be successful no matter what cards you're dealt. Your hand may be different than the person in a unit next to you who's got a completely different hand of cards dealt to them. But if you're all utilizing your toolkit at the core functionality of sustainable success, we can all be successful. It just may look a little bit different.
Okay, so I have to confess here, you suggested that we change the title to building confidence to emphasize that confidence piece. And what I'm hearing from you, Dan, is also that, recognition, again, is a tool, like John was sharing, but that you're using it in a kind of unique way that's not very superficial. You're trying to recognize those building blocks of a good fundraiser. Does that sound accurate?
Absolutely. And I want them to really lean in. Again, we're Purdue's a Plus Delta campus, right? So we want these folks to lean in. These are the lingo we try to instill in our fundraisers, is we try to get them to grasp the really granular pieces of the work that aren't fun. They're tough. But if they can cut their teeth in sustainable ways and they can start to build that confidence with these small wins, it starts to translate into bigger opportunities. And all of a sudden they're having wins they never imagined. And it doesn't mean this is a long period of time. This can happen in a fairly short window. And what's exciting is to watch it when that confidence strikes, and it makes it sound like lightning. But when that confidence comes in, all of a sudden you see them start to blossom like a spring flower, right? All of a sudden, boom. And then once they taste it, right? The first time any of us on this call ever tasted a prime steak versus maybe eating a cheeseburger, we're like, I want more of that, whatever that steak is, right? Now I'm a farm boy, so I'm going to bring up a lot of those types of metaphors. But when it comes to the staff, once they taste it, once they see it, visualize it, pick whatever term you want, once they can tangibly feel it in whatever way that is for them, they want more of it. And so that's what we're trying to instill, is get that snowball rolling.
That's amazing. And in a few moments or a few questions down the line, I'm going to ask you to think of or share with us some case study, like actual examples of when you've seen this happen, because I know in our pre-call conversations, both of you shared some pretty amazing examples. But my next question is for John, and that is to ask what types of like going now into the super granular thing. We talked about the why and the how you should think of recognition. But what types of recognition have you found to be most effective?
Well, it's really about asking a person how they want to be recognized. And maybe they don't know. Maybe they need to think about it. So then the next question is, tell me about a time that you received recognition that you really liked, so that we can understand, does a person want public recognition? Do they want private recognition? Or a little bit of both? Some people want everything. So it really comes down to how they want to receive it. What we try to do, I mentioned earlier about getting on the mat with the person. We want them to understand they've got support, that we're going to celebrate the wins and we're going to celebrate the failures. Because we all are going to fail if you get out. Dan mentioned this is tough work, but we want to be there for the person when they succeed. We also want to be there to prop them up when they don't succeed. That's the kind of culture that we want to try to create. So recognition pieces, you asked me some ways that we can recognize people. One thing I like to do is show the collaborative work. Those individuals who are involved in the gift, I want to make sure our CEO, our president, our leadership know that who all has been involved, even our deans. We have an academic unit. I know some of the listeners may not be part of an academic leader or a unit, but they might be involved in other areas with their board, with their advisory council, with their department heads or whomever. But we want to make sure they understand the depth and breadth of the person's involvement. No win can be small and no win can be big enough. We want to celebrate everything, and it's got to be genuine, it's got to be ongoing, and it's got to be talked about how it affects the entire organization. We know that we're only as strong as our weakest link, so we want every link to be strong.
You have me in tears now. I never thought this would happen in a professional conversation. Don't you gentlemen feel that there's a lot of parallelism in the way you're thinking about things with employees and internally and building your teams, and the way you think about things with donor relationships? So feeling valued, feeling seen, that comes up in lots of donor surveys as having a strong correlation, right, with retention and giving. I'm just starting to see that. Do you ever think of that? We're actually doing donor development work inside our shop in a way.
Yeah, if I could real quick on that one.
I went off script. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I will just the one quick answer to that one, Lewis, is that if I'm going to go to recruiting on this, right? I'm going to go to bring in employees to the shop, right? If we treat people as we're going to do direct mail to them and we're going to just send out a flyer, we're going to send out a note, and we're going to hope that 15 people apply to our job because we believe that we are the best thing on the block. That's going to lead to about 5 or 7 applications of the same 5 or 7 people that probably applied to the last 15 jobs we have. My own personal opinion, of course. There's always examples that fall outside of that. However, if we can approach it to the fact where we cultivate relationships and then we go and we may get told no, but we stay in front of these individuals, we build meaningful relationships with these individuals, and then we come back and we have other conversations, right? Timing is everything on all fronts. Timing's everything for a donor. Timing's everything for employees and recruitment. So we totally embrace that. And some of the successes that we've had building out new programs have largely been, I say this lovingly, getting people to leave shops that they aren't necessarily wanting to leave, but they're willing to leave it because they feel like they are really wanted, they're valued. And frankly, they've never had somebody come at them and really directly say, look, Lewis, you make us better, right? Like, we need you. And so these people are willing to take that scary leap sometimes that they have to take in order to be a part of that operation. So we totally embrace it that way.
So, and that's a very clear form of recognition, right? That you're applying from the very beginning. So let's go into the story part. As wonderful Major Gift fundraisers, I'm certain that you have really good stories about this, John, and maybe first John and then Dan. Do you have a few anecdotes, places where you've applied these concepts that come to mind?
Absolutely. I actually, I'm going to turn it back over to Dan because he's got some really good stories that I don't want to steal his thunder. He's done tremendous work this last year. We kicked off a new program in August. Amazing. And some of the things he's been able to do through what we've been discussing it's been remarkable. So Dan, I'll give it to you. Then maybe.
May I interrupt before Dan gets started, because John is very humble. I want to present myself as an example of recognition. When I was literally making coffees and running around making photocopies, John took me in his car. We had a long talk about Home Depot and the meaning of life and fundraising. And boy, does that have an impact. I mean, you just can't underestimate. It was probably the right type of recognition that I needed at that time. But identifying it, it literally changed professional paths. So I've experienced it myself. Dan, we'd love to hear about some of the stories. I know it's especially some of the recruiting stories you've shared with me were mind-blowing.
Yeah, I really just will highlight 2, and they're very different. There's other stories that are to some of the things you referenced there. The recruiting stuff is always fascinating, but there's 2 stories in particular that John and I had talked about before this that I thought were relevant to hopefully this audience in 2 different realms. But I totally echo what Lewis just said for the masses. John's not going to sit there and share too many stories, but it's truly impacted many people across many different organizations over his time, including myself. With that said, the story that I wanted to highlight from our new program, so special operations. A lot of people say, what on earth is special operations, right? Other than the name that we thought of and people like to, kind of look sideways at us on. It basically sits between what now the industry would, refer to as leadership annual giving, development experience officers, different programs that exist at more of a mass level, and then your individual unit gift officers. So you have this kind of, I'm going to call it purgatory that exists between the 2, if you will. And there's the special operations really focuses on the employee and that toolkit, right? And how can we really hone that toolkit so they go into a unit ready to rock? How can they go into that unit feeling really confident going into that unit? Back to the beginning of our discussion. Also, really focusing on the high affinity, high capacity donors that are out there. So the difference between our program and the traditional maybe DXO program that exists at different universities now and Purdue, that program's more high affinity, low capacity, just to oversimplify the 2, but that's essentially a delineation and kind of where they're looking at prospects. So when you focus on some of the people that we've had a chance to bring in, there's one individual who came in with no fundraising experience, straight out of graduate school, mid-20s. And the person was hired in a very maybe unconventional way because former athlete, which again, I as a former student athlete myself, I will go to war for student athletes and what they can bring to the game on work tenacity. Secondly, this individual was a really good recruiter and was a coach prior, and knew this person had the ability to be very personable with individuals and had the work ethic and was extremely coachable. If you can check those 3 boxes, how much money someone's raised doesn't always matter, right? Like somebody can tell me how much money they've raised, and I'm going to say, great, tell me how you did it, right? Because I need to see the nuts and bolts of how you did it, not just that you walked into a big one. So In this case, this individual came in and started from really ground zero, and in partnership with this organization and specifically John, who the programs kind of flow as a part of, I launched kind of a couple different efforts with him and this individual and laid out kind of a path. And this person started on that path. They were able to unearth an incredible opportunity that closed, that booked a very large gift this year. It was kind of a two-part opportunity where a donor said no to the first solicitation, and then but in the process, it was a hard reset for their life, kind of things they weren't interested in giving to before. But then the donor came back and said, after being on campus, I really think I need to let this disgruntledness I've had in this area go. I really need to increase my resources there. So it went from up front, that donor saying, I have no interest in X, Y, and Z, which was very crystal clear to anyone who would listen to the donor, to then the donor pivoting and saying, I actually think I want to give there. And so it led to a couple months worth the effort of cultivation, kind of re-engaging, re-qualifying, if you will. And then ultimately, about 7 or 8 months after the very first interaction, this individual who's not even been here a year yet had the first $1.5 million opportunity that ended up coming in. There's a kind of a two-part gift that'll end up being $2.5 million total in cash, but it's the first part booked at $1.5 million for Purdue Day of Giving. So really excited to see a person who was so nervous the whole way through the process, but stuck to the process and learned leaps and bounds throughout that entire situation. The fun part and the rewarding part, again, back to confidence, is that person was constantly meeting with our team, constantly meeting with the people in the unit that this donor was going to be giving to. So for myself and this person, it was constant feedback coaching, right? That's the rewarding part of this, is that you can start to, in these types of situations, invest in your employee, provide them that roadmap to success, and then let them send the emails, let them do the notes, let them do the work, but kind of show them where they need to get to. Because then once that confidence strikes, you start to see them really grow. So it's been fun to see that story come to fruition over this past school year.
Wow, incredible! That's amazing. You also shared, Dan, some stories about recruiting on very condensed timelines, and that was pretty incredible. So. For folks who are here on the call and are saying, okay, this is wonderful, I want to do it right away. What in the world does this have to do with Almabase? Well, we do have a recognition initiative going. So if sometimes, you all, from my understanding, started this program and sold it internally and have been successful in starting this operation at Purdue, which is, I would say, industry leading. Others may not have so many tools for recognition. Maybe the Almabase 50 under 50 initiative is a way to recognize a team member that helps your own team. So we'll put up the link to that in a minute, you'll see that in the comments. Tell me, so next I have one question which is kind of off script, but before that, I'm going to invite everybody to ask questions, people that are here today. With John and with Dan, feel free to ask any questions in the chat. We'll try to address them all. We have just a few minutes left. And maybe John and Dan, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Louis, our email address is it's J as in John, A as in a middle initial, last name Dinkins, DINKENS at Purdue, PURDUE, FOR life, LIFE.org. J Dinkins at PurdueForLife.org. And Dan's is DB Bolson.
DA Bolson at PurdueForLife.org. So they all follow the same model.
You both have a middle name that's an A?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing different is 2 letters.
DA Bolson at PurdueForLife.org. And you can also always reach us on LinkedIn. We both are very active on LinkedIn, so people are welcome to connect there as well. And
Louis, if I may, I want to go back on something because I'm not
Please
sure
do.
the talk that everyone expected for recognition. What Dan and I discussed and what we talked with you was creating not just something that would be a one-time recognition, but something that would be sustainable and help the person grow professionally. What Dan and what we discussed is that we don't only want to change philanthropy within our institution, we want all organizations to be doing really, really well. And it takes time, it takes effort. Um, I'm a parent of two daughters. Dan, you and Lewis both know this. If I were to give my daughter or daughters a annual check or a gift once a year, they may appreciate it, but what they really want is the dedicated time, the commitment to be with them every step of their life. And that's what we're trying to offer with our program. And in essence, our recognition is ourselves, our being, our life, our commitment to this individual, as well as their commitment back to us.
Yeah, and the proof comes through the employees that you invest in. I mean, when you invest in them and you invest the time in them, the most rewarding thing is when it comes from them and what they say about how they felt, how they experienced it, and the success that they have, obviously. But I really want to challenge everyone who has attended today to think about recognition differently, because it's really easy. If you're a person who's at even a midpoint of your career, and the first thing on your mind is to go in, and as soon as you get that win, you're like, I need more money. I need more of a title, right? There becomes a point that is a conversation, right? It happens naturally with career paths. But I see so many people jump to that as the way of being recognized, like my value is seen through this. That while that may be true, and it is true in some cases, I'm not diminishing that overall, but I'm saying rethink what else is a part of that conversation for yourself as well as your organization, because there are other ways of really meaningfully investing in employees, from recognizing them, that comes into also developing them. So recognition's linked directly to that development personally, and that development creates sustainability, because a pay raise happens once a year. I saw this on a meme earlier today, which I felt was like serendipitous of being here. It's a pay raise happens once a year. A bad culture happens daily, right? So create that culture that's not a bad culture. Create that culture that you want to be a part of every single day, because then you're going to have less people coming in the office saying, I need this, this, and this, if they're truly going home and saying, I've never been a part of something that's so high functioning as this. And as aspirational as that sounds, we can create it. We can't always create our entire universities or colleges or everything to be the culture that we desire, but you can create it in the culture you can control. So get that controllable variable and control it. It sounds simple, but it's unfortunately underutilized.
Ta-da. Okay, closing remarks. What's your vision for maybe careers in our industry, and specifically at Purdue? And where do young professionals who are super excited about what they've heard today, what do they need to do to get in touch with you?
Well, you can always reach out, as we mentioned, via email or LinkedIn. Love to connect with individuals through those venues. My parting words would be, Lewis, if I may, just bloom where you're planted. We've heard that quote so many times, and be prepared. If you want to advance, be prepared in your current job to do the next job. If you're not in an environment where you think it's conducive for growth, then create those opportunities yourself. Speak to your supervisors on how you can expand and how you can grow. If you are in a culture of collaborative work, take on responsibilities outside of your specific unit. Show that leadership, show those opportunities that you can make an impact beyond just what you're doing. Going back to the recognition, those things will come. Develop the career, develop the skills, the habits, and the rest of it will come.
I'm going to probably over butcher this quote, but there was a quote yesterday that I heard as part of the graduation celebration that said that a person's beginning to understand life is a person who plants a seed for a tree that will produce shade they'll never sit in. I mean, and we can oversimplify that quote, but essentially it's we all are trying to leave something that creates legacy, but also create not just with the donor piece, right, but with our employees and with the way we create philanthropy for our different cultures that we're in and the work culture that we're a part of. So I want anyone that's listening to this who feels like they're on an island or in a small ship. I'm a D3 guy in my background, right? So before I came to the big ship at Purdue, I worked at a very small campus, and it's interesting that you're not alone. Right. I think it's easy to feel alone in this industry at times. You're not alone, and you may never choose to work at a bigger ship or something that isn't higher ed or even outside higher ed. But find those people that can be those industry peers and those industry connections, much of the work that you do, Lewis, and many others to create these conversations and these cultures, that's so very critical, because you can always find those people who are willing to have dialogue. Speaking to people is what we do for a living. So speaking to one another doesn't happen as much as it probably should have. So, don't feel like you're on an island, and find that work culture that makes you get up every morning and say, I want to be a part of that. Because if you can find that, the rest will take care of itself.
Get out of the bed roaring for the new day. It's been super inspiring, John and Dan, to be able to spend some time with you. Thank you for sharing this with the profession. Anybody who wants to recognize a peer, check out the link, almabase.com/50u50. And then do not forget to reach out to John and Dan with any questions. I know for a fact that they're immensely helpful and knowledgeable. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Lewis.
Thanks.
Thank you.